When I dialed my son Adrian's number to ask about the date of his wedding, his fiancée Marissa looked me straight in the eye with a sharp little smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited a few very special people." The words hit me like a door slamming in my face. Very special people. I, who for nearly 4 years had paid their rent, helped buy their car, and filled their cupboards when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood frozen in the hallway of my own home, the phone heavy in my hand, watching my son avoid my gaze while Marissa settled comfortably on the armchair I had bought for them. The pale blue dress I had chosen for their big day hung useless in my closet, next to the shoes I had polished until they gleamed. All of it, my preparations, my excitement, my quiet dreams of sharing their happiest moment, meant nothing. I had spent weeks planning every detail, even setting aside money to give them a generous wedding gift. I'd phoned my sister Clara in Seattle to share the good news. I'd scrubbed every corner of my house, imagining that after the ceremony, they might stop by for a small family celebration. But in one icy sentence, all those plans collapsed. "Only special people." Adrian finally raised his eyes and said, in a voice that sounded rehearsed, "Mom, it was just a private thing. Small, intimate, only the two of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. Later that evening I saw the photos on social media. Marissa's parents stood proudly beside the bride and groom. Her brothers toasted with champagne. I saw the white dress. The same dress I had helped finance with the $700 I gave Marissa for personal expenses last month. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. For days afterward, I moved like a ghost around my own house. The refrigerator still held the cake ingredients I had bought for the celebration. The dining table was stacked with little envelopes of cash I had planned to slip into a wedding card. Every corner of my home whispered the same cruel truth. Had been erased. A week later, 7 exact days after that humiliation, Marissa called with a very different voice. Gone was the confident young woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate. "Mrs. Hanson," she said softly, almost pleading. "The landlord is pressuring us. The rent is overdue. You forgot to make the transfer this month." Her voice trembled as if the world were ending. I remained silent for a long moment, remembering every hurried trip to the bank, every cancelled plan, every quiet sacrifice, to make sure they had a roof over their heads. Finally I said, with a calm that surprised even me, "Marissa, didn't I tell you once that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, it was not I who trembled, but her. "Mrs. Hanson, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mom to me." All sweetly packaged lies. The same voice she used when asking for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, all of which I had helped pay for, never knowing I would be barred from the ceremony. For so many years I had tiptoed through this relationship, measuring every word, every gift, hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the silent provider, the woman who never protested when treated as invisible. But those 3 words, "only special people," awakened something in me that had slept far too long. That night, after I hung up the phone, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the tears come. But these weren't the soft tears of a heartbroken mother. They were hot, angry tears, years of silent humiliation boiling to the surface. I cried for the nights I skipped dinners out with friends so I could send Adrian another transfer. I cried for the afternoons I worked overtime at the library, telling myself that every extra dollar would help them get on their feet. And most of all, I cried for the foolish woman I had become. A woman who believed that love could be bought if she only gave enough. When the tears dried, something inside me shifted. I walked to the kitchen, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and laid out my checkbook and bank statements on the table. I wanted to see the truth in numbers. Monthly rent of $600 for 48 months. $28,800. Groceries and supplies about $250 a month. $12,000. Birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries. $3,500. Car repairs, doctor visits. Emergencies. $4,200. Furniture for their apartment, which they had promised to pay back someday. $1,700. Total. $50,200. I stared at the figure until the digits blurred. $50,000. Money that could have repaired my roof. Paid for the long-delayed trip to Italy my late husband and I once dreamed of. Or simply ensured a peaceful retirement. Instead, it had disappeared into the endless pit of Adrian and Marissa's needs. The next morning I dressed carefully and drove to the bank. Mr. Lewis, the branch manager, greeted me with his usual warm smile. He had processed every one of my transfers for years. "Mrs. Hanson," he said, surprised when I asked to cancel all automatic payments. "Are you sure? You've been so consistent." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady. "And I want to make certain no one else has access to my accounts. From now on, every cent stays under my control." His brow furrowed with concern. "Has someone pressured you into this change?" "No," I said. "For once, I'm the one pressuring myself to finally open my eyes." While he processed the forms, my phone buzzed relentlessly in my purse. "Adrian. Marissa. Adrian again." I turned it off without even checking the messages. For the first time in years, my money and my peace of mind were entirely my own. Driving home, I noticed the world looked different. The trees seemed sharper against the autumn sky. The sidewalks glowed in the afternoon light. It was as if by reclaiming my finances, I had also reclaimed my ability to see. That evening, as I watered the small garden Adrian used to play in as a child, I thought about the little boy who once hugged me and said, "Mom, you're the best in the world." When had he become a man who treated me like a walking bank account? Or had I simply refused to see who he really was all along? I was still lost in thought when headlights swept across my driveway. Two cars pulled in, Adrian's and Marissa's. Before I could react, I heard keys turning in my front door. Of course they still had keys. I had given them access years ago, believing trust was love. The door swung open, and the two of them walked in as if they owned the place. Adrian's face was drawn, his eyes sharp. Marissa clutched a thick folder of papers. "Mom," Adrian began, his tone carefully neutral. "We need to talk about what's going on. Mr. Grant, our attorney, is here to help." Behind them, a man in a gray suit stepped into my living room. My living room, where every piece of furniture bore the imprint of my sacrifices. He introduced himself with a polite but unsettling smile. "Mrs. Hanson," he said, extending a hand I did not take. "I'm here because your children are concerned about your well-being. They believe recent financial decisions suggest you might need assistance in managing your affairs." My stomach tightened. Assistance. I knew exactly what that meant. A legal attempt to declare me incompetent. To seize control of my finances under the guise of protection. I gathered my papers from the coffee table and held them to my chest. "These are my private documents," I said firmly. "You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom," Adrian said, softening his voice in a way that only made it worse. "We're worried about you. Cutting off communication, canceling transfers, it's not like you. Maybe you're under too much stress." Marissa stepped closer, her expression dripping with false concern. "Helen," she said sweetly, "loneliness at your age can make things confusing. Maybe we should get you evaluated, just to be safe." Confusing. There it was. The word meant to unravel my confidence. But I wasn't confused. For the first time in years I was crystal clear. "Get out," I said quietly. "This conversation is over. From now on, any communication will go through my lawyer." Their eyes widened. They weren't expecting resistance. As they left, Marissa muttered something about family obligations. And Adrian gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Half anger, half disbelief. When the door finally closed, I locked it, turned on the security system, and felt a strange calm settle over me. They could threaten, manipulate, and hire all the lawyers they wanted. But the tide had turned. For the first time in decades, I belonged to myself. The following morning, I woke to a quiet house and a dozen unread messages on my phone. Adrian's texts ranged from pleading, "Mom, we just want to help," to angry, "You're being unreasonable. We have rights too." Marissa's messages were longer, full of sweet words laced with threats. "We love you like a mother. But if you keep shutting us out, we'll have to protect you from yourself." Protect me from myself. The phrase made my stomach twist. I spent that morning calling lawyers. Most gave polite, professional advice. But it was Ms. Dana Patel who listened with genuine understanding. Her voice was calm and firm, the kind of voice that carries you through a storm. "Mrs. Hanson," she said after hearing everything, "what they're attempting is a form of guardianship abuse. They'll try to argue that you're incapable of managing your finances. But if you remain alert, document every action, and demonstrate independence, they won't succeed." She instructed me to gather financial records, cancel any shared accounts, and keep a written log of every interaction. "Don't meet them alone," she warned. "And do not respond to emotional manipulation. Facts and boundaries will protect you." For the next 2 weeks, I followed her advice like a soldier preparing for war. I secured my bank accounts, changed the locks, and installed cameras around the house. Every call, every visit, every threatening message was recorded. The more they pushed, the stronger I became. Adrian tried a new tactic. Nostalgia. One evening he left a voicemail, his voice trembling. "Remember when we used to build snow forts in the backyard, Mom? You're still my best friend. Why are you shutting me out?" I listened to the message twice, tears stinging my eyes. I remembered that little boy. His cheeks red from the cold, his laughter ringing through the winter air. But the man leaving this voicemail was not that boy. This man wanted my savings, not my stories. When emotional pleas failed, Marissa escalated. She arrived at my doorstep one rainy afternoon, soaking wet and clutching a stack of papers. "Helen," she said breathlessly, "please sign these forms. They'll just give Adrian temporary access to help manage bills. It's only for your own good." I looked at her, rain dripping from her expensive coat. For years I had mistaken her polished charm for warmth. Now I saw the calculation behind every smile. "No," I said simply, and closed the door. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door with a legal notice. Adrian and Marissa had filed a petition for guardianship. A hearing was scheduled for the following month. The papers trembled in my hands. But deep inside, a quiet strength took root. They thought they could frighten me into submission. They didn't realize I was no longer the mother who paid silently and hoped for scraps of affection. The weeks leading up to the hearing were a blur of preparation. Ms. Patel met me regularly to review documents and rehearse testimony. She encouraged me to keep living independently to prove my competence. So I did. I cooked, cleaned, balanced my accounts, and even began volunteering at the local community center, helping elderly neighbors with basic computer skills. Each small act of independence became a weapon in my defense. The day of the hearing, I wore a navy suit I hadn't put on since my husband's funeral. As I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounded. But my steps were steady. Adrian and Marissa sat at the petitioner's table, their lawyer whispering in their ears. Adrian looked tense. Marissa wore a mask of polite concern. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, asked me to describe my daily life. I spoke clearly about managing my finances, running my household, and volunteering at the center. When Adrian's lawyer questioned me, I met every accusation with calm facts. No, I was not confused about my bank accounts. No, I had not made any reckless withdrawals. Yes, I had chosen to end financial support because I no longer wished to fund their lifestyle. Finally, the judge turned to Adrian. Mr. Hansen, she said evenly. What evidence do you have that your mother is incapable of managing her affairs? Adrian shifted uncomfortably. She cancelled payments suddenly. She's isolating herself. That's not normal. The judge raised an eyebrow. Canceling financial support for adult children is not evidence of incompetence. It is evidence of sound judgment. Marissa tried to interject, but the judge silenced her with a firm gesture. After reviewing the documents, the judge announced her decision. The petition for guardianship is denied. Mrs. Helen Hansen has demonstrated full capacity to manage her life and finances. Furthermore, I advise the petitioners to respect her autonomy. Any further harassment may result in legal consequences. The gavel struck sharp and final. Sound like freedom. Adrian avoided my eyes as they left the courtroom. Marissa's carefully composed face cracked for the first time, revealing something cold and furious beneath. I walked out into the crisp winter air, my lawyer beside me, and felt the heavy chains of fear fall away. For the first time in years, the future was mine alone. The morning after the hearing, I woke before sunrise. For a moment I lay still, listening to the quiet hum of my house. No anxious phone calls. No urgent texts demanding rent or groceries. Just the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint whistle of the winter wind. Freedom, I realized, does not arrive with fanfare. It slips in quietly, like dawn seeping through a half-closed curtain. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching a thin layer of frost shimmer across the garden. For years I had measured my worth by how much I could give. Now I measured it by something far simpler. How fully I could breathe. The next week I began making changes. The first was practical. I listed the house for sale. It was too large for one person and too full of memories. That no longer comforted me. The realtor, a cheerful young woman named Sophie, marveled at my decisiveness. Most clients your age hesitate, she said. But I only smiled. I've hesitated long enough, I replied. The second change was more personal. I booked a month-long trip through Italy. A journey my late husband and I had once dreamed of, but never taken. I imagined strolling through Florence at sunset, tasting fresh olives in the Tuscan hills, standing before the quiet beauty of the Amalfi Coast. For years I had funded other people's adventures. Now it was time to fund my own. News of my plans spread quickly through the small town. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years stopped by to offer congratulations or share travel tips. At the community center where I volunteered, people cheered when I announced the trip. It struck me how easily warmth and friendship had been waiting, just beyond the walls I had built around myself. Adrian called twice during those weeks, but I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages were shorter now, stripped of the false sweetness that once coated his words. "Mom," he said in one, "I guess you've made your decision. I hope you're okay." I listened without anger or sorrow. For the first time I felt nothing but clarity. Love does not vanish, but it changes. I would always wish him well, but I no longer needed to be his endless supply of money or forgiveness. The house sold faster than expected. When the final papers were signed, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The echoes of my footsteps mingled with memories. Adrian's childhood laughter, family dinners, quiet nights reading beside my husband. I touched the doorframe gently, not with regret, but with gratitude for the life that had shaped me. On my final night there, I stood on the back porch beneath a sky scattered with stars. The cold air smelled of pine and possibility. For years I had been told, directly or indirectly, that my value lay in what I could provide. But standing there, I knew the truth. My worth had never depended on anyone's approval, not even my own son's. When the taxi arrived the next morning, I carried a single suitcase, light enough for a new beginning. Epilogue. A different kind of family. Italy was everything I hoped for and more. I wandered through cobblestone streets, ate gelato by the Arno River, and sat for hours in tiny cafes, where strangers shared stories that felt like gifts. In Rome, I met a group of travelers from around the world. Artists, teachers, retirees, a widower from Spain, who made me laugh until my sides ached. We became a temporary family, bound not by obligation but by choice. Each night I wrote in a small leather journal, capturing moments of wonder. The sound of church bells at dusk, the taste of freshly baked focaccia, the simple joy of belonging only to myself. One evening, while watching the sunset from a hilltop in Siena, I finally allowed myself to whisper the words that had lived inside me since the day of the wedding. I am special, I said softly. Not because I give, not because anyone invites me. I am special because I exist. The wind carried the words across the valley, and for the first time in decades, felt whole.